Hello, everyone. This is the content video for Biology Unit 4. We're still talking about genetics, and we're going to look at how genetic variation occurs. And aside from mutations, the main way that this is made is through something called crossing over. And crossing over happens during meiosis. And remember that meiosis produces germ cells, right? Those sex cells that we've been talking about with the different alleles and all that. So crossing over happens when those chromosome segments are lined up during prophase of meiosis. And as the homologous chromosomes line up, they can actually kind of twist around each other and they almost recombine. From that, we call them recombinant chromatids. So the chromosomes are slightly different. So you can see on this image, the diagram below, that these two sets of homologous chromosomes will overlap one another, and as they overlap, they switch. So you can see that the orange one now has blue parts on it, and the blue one now has orange parts on it. Right? And this allows you to look different from your siblings, right? The other ways that this occurs are through some complicated inheritance patterns. So incomplete dominance is when the heterozygote is a blend of traits between the dominant and the recessive. So if you've got a red dominant flower and white is the recessive allele, then the heterozygote would have a pink phenotype. Right? We'll talk a little bit about this with snapdragons later. Codominant is when both alleles, the dominant and the recessive, are expressed when there's a heterozygote. The sickle cell anemia that we talked about it feels like a month ago, at least for us in our time when I'm recording this, is the primary example of this, where yes, there are some good red blood cells that are produced, but there are also some that are weaker and form those sickle-shaped when they collapse. Inheritance via multiple alleles is when more than one allele actually impacts the trait. So things like height, how tall you are a good example of this, because it's not just one single allele that determines how tall you grow to be as an adult human. So we've got multiple alleles. Some of them impact your height, some don't, and some will impact a few other factors that lead to how tall you can grow, like bone strength and density. Polygenic inheritance is when more than one gene can impact your traits, and they will blend together to give you that trait. Skin color is a primary example of this that we could talk about, because it links to 3 different genes, and some of these genes will code towards lighter skin colors. Some different alleles will go towards darker skin colors, and the blend of these will tell your skin how much melanin to produce in the melanocytes, and that will give you different gradients of skin color. It's also why you and your siblings may have slightly different skin colors. I have a slightly pinkish hue to my skin, while my sister has a more slightly yellow hue to hers. We're both still Caucasian. Epistasis is the interaction of multiple genes to generate a specific phenotype. So instead of blending, these are going to generate very drastically color differences. The diagram that's below me shows coat color for mice, where we've got a heterozygous mother and father mouse being bred together. So we're going to do that dihybrid cross that we talked about last time, and we're going to use B trait, B alleles, and C alleles. You can see there in the bottom corner that the dominant, capital B, is for black coats, and lowercase b is for brown coat. But it notes that these are polygenes, so these are representation of more genes than just this, right? And then C codes for if there's pigmentation at all. So capital C is with pigmentation, lowercase c is without pigmentation. These would be albino mice, right? So you can see that the dihybrid cross occurs, and yes, this one is skewed into a diamond, but that's just for stylistic choices, really. If you want to turn your head to the side, you can see it a lot better. And you'll see that when the dominant allele is present for black coat and the capital C is present for with pigmentation, you get black coated mice. And that's the majority of these, right? There are 9 black coated mice out of the 16 possible combinations. So over 50%. 3 of the 16 give us this brown coat. So it has the recessive for color, but the dominant for pigmentation. So it does produce a color, and that color isn't black, it's brown. The remaining 4 lack the pigmentation gene at all. So they've got the recessive C, the lowercase c, and because of that gene, no pigmentation is made. It doesn't matter what the genotype is for the B allele. It could be dominant or it could be recessive. Right? And so this gives us a 25% albino mice phenotype. All right, so we talked about a few different ways that meiosis makes genetic variation. Remember that crossing over occurs during prophase. So it's mainly prophase 1 that this occurs. It can happen in prophase 2. All right, that is something that can occur, but it happens mainly during prophase 1. And this gives us a variation in the chromosomes that are passed on to the gamete. And that's the sex cell, the germ cell. So no matter what the body cell's alleles are, the germ cell can be slightly different. And each gamete can have different genotypes inside it. And during mating, those will combine to give us the variation that occurs during the Punnett square analyses. We talked about a few other secondary ways that this can happen, right? So if you have any questions, remember to reach out and contact me. Always keep learning and asking questions.